You have to make sure that the technology is not replacing humans, but it is working in cohesion with them. And the human team has to be the priority in my view.
Can you achieve extraordinary results while making the world a better place? I'm Bruce Temkin, and together we'll explore how. Welcome to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Join me as I speak with visionary leaders and top experts to uncover the secrets of humanity-centric leadership. Ready to rethink leadership? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back. Digital transformation is often treated as a technology problem, something driven by tools, systems, and platforms. But what if the real key to transformation isn't technology at all? What if the path to success lies in understanding and empowering people? Today, we're diving into that question with Kamales Lardi, a globally recognized digital transformation expert, speaker, and advisor. Kamales is the CEO of Lardi Partner Consulting and author of the best-selling book, The Human Side of Digital Business Transformation. With more than 25 years of experience from Fortune 500 companies to government agencies, she helps leaders embrace emerging technologies while keeping humanity at the center. In this conversation, we'll explore how leaders can drive meaningful change, balance tech with empathy, and build organizations where people and innovation thrive together. Let's jump in and welcome Kamales Lardi. Welcome.
Wonderful to be here, Bruce. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here. You've built an impressive career at the intersection of technology and leadership. How did your journey in this space begin? And what drew you to this intersection of business, technology, and humanity?
Well, this is interesting that you asked that. My journey actually started in the center of tech, right? So in the mid to late 90s, I started off as a coder. And so I was just, fully embedded in the nuts and bolts of technology and development. And so a lot of what I was doing back then was really trying to just build the skills necessary to ensure technology implementation was done well. But very early on, one of the things I noticed was technology is just a tool, and the tool's only as good as the people using those tools. One of the very first big projects I worked on, I was a consultant for one of the big fours. We were implementing this massive SAP transformation piece, and we noticed that the technology was not delivering the outcomes that we had expected. And a big part of that reason, after investigating why it wasn't working, we realized that people were not using the tool because they didn't have trust in it. And so they were falling back on their old ways of doing things and using the tool as a data entry system at the end of the day. So they were actually increasing the amount of time they needed to do the same work. And so this was my aha moment back then, where I figured, yes, technology is critical and technology is transforming at a very rapid pace, but we're seeing the limitation almost in the entire system being how well we take people on that journey with us in terms of technology transformation. And that really started off my journey along these lines of looking at technology implementation and digital transformation from the human perspective.
Awesome. So we're going to get into some of that thinking, but interested. I think our listeners might be interested. How do you go from a coder, right? You're like this, to someone who's talking about humanity and people and their resistance. What did you do to yourself to build out that portfolio of capabilities and knowledge to be where you are today?
This was actually, I have to say, the transformation journey happened on me as well. So I went through this sort of leadership transformation. And there are still days today where I can sit with the coding and the technology and completely forget my environment. And I think a couple of experiences that I had over the years, as a consultant, as a business advisor, one of the key elements or one of the key characteristics for me is really to be able to embed myself in different business industries and functional levels. And this requires a deep empathy for how people do things and why they do things the way they do. And taking that view has had a significant impact on the way or the success rate of the transformation initiatives that we've implemented. And this is one of the things that I learned over the years. And it was really a transformation journey for myself as well.
Great. Well, let's get into something that a lot of companies still get wrong. Like you said, they treat digital transformation like a software rollout, something you can deploy on a timeline, call it done. But you said again and again that this work is really about people, and that if you miss the human side, the whole thing falls apart. So you've argued that successful transformation is 80% people and 20% tech. Why do so many organizations still treat it like a software upgrade?
Companies are still built around this traditional environment, the traditional system of, the way that organizations are measured, the way teams and leadership are measured, the way reward and kind of, implementations are structured. All of those elements are still very much focused on tangible implementations, right? So oftentimes I've had conversations with leadership teams where, they've got a quarterly goal to set or to reach, and they've got a technology they need to implement. So within the first quarter of the year, we need to implement AI, XYZ decision-making system, whatever it may be. And they've got to tick that box in order to achieve their goals for the year. And as long as we have these sort of measures, systems, and structures in place, it's going to be very difficult to shift the mindsets within organizations and have them looking at things from a different perspective. But over 70% digital transformation initiatives globally tend to fail, or they fall short of their intended objectives. And at this rate, we are spending over $3 trillion globally in digital transformation initiatives. By the end of 2025, we would be spending over $3 trillion in that space. And so it's really worthwhile for companies to take a look at why we're doing things the way we're doing it and how things could be different in this new environment. And add to that the additional element of technology changing so rapidly, right? Something you've implemented in the first quarter of the year, by the second quarter, it could be outdated or there could be something newer in the market. And so really the fallback element for companies to stay the course and ensure that they are dynamic enough, but still strategic enough to be competitive in the market is to focus on that human element as well.
You advocate that this human-centered digital transformation is the way to go. What does it actually look like in a large, complex organization? And how does that look differently than the deployment-centered approach that you just talked about?
So if we look at traditional deployment of a technology within a company, the human element or the piece that we all know of is called change management, right? And this is an element that we tend to think of at the end of the engagement. So we have the design, development, implementation, testing, all of those things done for the technology. And then at the very end, we think about, okay, how are we going to roll this out? Let's create a change management initiative. Let's have some trainings and let's have a communication plan. And all of these come really at the tail end of transformation. Now, what we're talking about with the human element is we start at the very beginning with these human elements designed and built into the process. So we start at the very beginning with what's the purpose here? What are we trying to achieve? How does this fit into the organization structure? How does it fit into the employee's environment, the customer's environment? So start that thinking at the very beginning. And throughout the process of the transformation, throughout the build development, we have engagement with the people who are going to be using these technologies, the people who are going to be engaging with these technologies. We bring them in very early on and engage with them throughout the process. And so the transformation happens with the people on board. And this is a process that I've described in my book in more detail, that takes you through every step of the process. But there's engagement and there's how you do that engagement and specific elements that you can bring in to ensure that you're taking people in the organization on the journey rather than informing them of the journey once it's at the end.
Great. One of the things that I've written about is the notion of a point of value. Right. I think all too often people with any type of project focus on the implementation of it. And so I've argued that you have to have clarity around what defines value for the audiences that are going to use it and have that be the place where you go, hooray, we've made it, as opposed to the technology is live or this project hit a milestone. What's your thinking about defining the value in advance and holding yourself accountable to achieving at least that initial set of value with whatever transformation you're doing?
So we actually do apply a similar approach. So when we talk about point of value at the very beginning, when purpose is set, we look at what value are we creating for the business? And this really comes to a very laser focused outcome where we look at, at the end of the day, there's really 4 key elements we want to achieve through these technology solutions. whether it's growth and scale, productivity and efficiency, risk management, or better experiences, either customer or employee experiences. And so we really try to focus in on what the solution is bringing to these sort of values or objectives, and understand what are some of the key challenges that the organization is currently facing. Because when we talk about digital transformation, it can be such a broad space or spectrum of things that could be implemented. And so we want to focus in on these are the key challenges that the company is facing at the moment. Let's zoom in on that and let's see how these technology solutions could deliver value towards these key challenges. And that allows us then to focus in on the kind of strategic element for the company. But when it comes down to the human element, this may be slightly different from the kind of business value creation, right? So this could be, efficiency could be something very important for the organization, but efficiency could look very different in different departments. And it could be in certain departments, they forego efficiency in order to create better team spirit that at the end of the day produces more creative results. And so having this better understanding of the human element will then allow us to understand, do we have contradictory values, and where do we, how do we kind of effect change in those areas? And it could be certain areas would require behavioral changes and mindset shifts that allow them to understand what efficiency is and how they could do things better. And oftentimes, some of the elements that we deal with is very close to addressing, people have a very close identity to the work that they do, right? So their identity is tied very closely to the work that they do. So, and coming in and changing the way they do things might result in almost threatening the way they see themselves in that work environment. And so having this kind of process of building trust with the people that we're working with the teams that we're going to be impacting, and understanding what value is for them and how that aligns with the organization value and the goals that are being set. I think these are some of the key elements that we work on. It's an art and a science together, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So it sounds like what you're saying, and I think you said in the past, is change is never just rational, right? There are people involved and it's deeply emotional, especially when the pace of transformation outstrips people's natural capacity to absorb the change. How can neuroscience and topics like behavioral economics help leaders better manage resistance to that change?
So this is one of the unique things that we bring to the table as well, is coming in from a neuroscience perspective helps the leadership teams that we work with understand the way their organization and teams react to the change that we're bringing. And oftentimes, I've worked with too many leadership teams that say, okay, it's a mandate, let's order this, put it out as a mandate and have it done, and people have to follow the instructions. And these sort of approaches tend to be very limited in terms of the outcome, and it tends to be more detrimental. We see longer implementation times, we see more costs related to that, we see more issues and challenges, and so on. And so when we come from a neuroscience perspective, we're coming from the understanding that there's a reason why people behave the way they behave. Let's understand those reasons first. And oftentimes it falls back on a fear perspective. People are afraid of change. People are afraid of new things. We are, as a system, we are built to resist organization change. We're resisting things to maintain the status quo where we're comfortable. And so we're bringing in this disruptive element. And add to that the layer of AI at the moment, which is so disruptive. And it's rapidly changing the way we work and the way we do things. And so bringing that neuroscience perspective where we tell leadership teams, let's try to understand the fear behind the reactions that we're getting. Let's try to bring in techniques that can manage that. We tend to approach, or the techniques we tend to use fall into several different categories, either at a cognitive level, where we use storytelling to engage with people, at a team level where we use social synchrony or social brain characteristics, so getting people together, creating that sense of belonging, having them interact with one another. So for example, if you create a workshop session, we add in exercises and activities within the workshop to ensure that there's a synchrony within the teams.
So I love the notion of synchrony. I think that's a wonderful sort of mental model to have on how you get organizations to work effectively together. How do you drive synchrony after the workshop, right? Like sometimes it's easy to create these sort of false almost sort of surreal environments in a workshop, but then, everyone goes and does their day job. How do you continue synchrony on an ongoing basis for a team?
One of the things that we do is ensure that the teams that we're working with within the transformation initiatives, the teams tend to consistently stay together. And so not necessarily in a physical environment. And this is one of the things I have to preface. We work with international teams, and oftentimes, people are not in the same physical space. So we tend to try and use technology collaboration platforms in different kinds of formats to kind of almost facilitate that synchrony. And we break some of the work processes up into smaller pieces that different teams can work on together. So once we establish the synchrony and the sense of belonging, the sense of team spirit, we then give them an outcome or a piece of work to complete as something that contributes to the overall project and something that delivers. First, it creates a sense of ownership, but then it delivers to the overall outcome, and they see that result being implemented at the end. And so this creates that continuous ongoing connection to the work that we're doing, but also that sense of ownership for the outcome that's going to be produced. And so this continuous engagement with the various teams does help.
Could you share a story where resistance was successfully turned into momentum and what shifted in that team, in that organization?
Definitely. One of the examples I can think of, I was working with a leadership team in the consumer finance industry here in Switzerland. So we did a 6-month digital leadership coaching where I was taking them through the process of digital transformation and guiding them through creating a new strategy for the organization. And this was a company that was at the point of losing business. So they were a shrinking business. Apart from, the obvious kind of financial concerns, I think the team as well had a significant concern around where they were going to end up at the end of the process and if things were going to significantly change for them. So we started off the process with a lot of resistance to change, a lot of resistance towards, we don't know what this process is, we don't know if it's going to work, and we are not sure we want to participate. And so one of the things we did was, so I was a one-to-one coach with this group, and we broke them up into smaller groups of 4. So these were all the top level executives in the company, broke them into groups of 4. And I worked with them on a weekly basis with each of the individual groups to take on one key challenge within the organization and work that out with a new kind of outside the box thinking. So thinking beyond traditional solutions. And this is one of the kind of digital business innovation processes that we work on. And really trying to understand what the key challenge is, what you would typically do. And we use something called How Might We, which is a process to think beyond what you traditionally would do. And with each of the groups, we worked on the solution together over a 6-month period. And through that process of weekly engagement, I was able to kind of gradually shift the mindset towards a more innovative thinking away from the traditional solutions towards more innovative elements. And so this was one of the exciting outcomes. The organization was actually able to implement 2 of those key work outputs that was delivered. The biggest success point for me was the head of product development in that group, who at the very beginning was someone who had said, I'm here because my boss wants me to be here and I'm not willing to participate or engage. And at the very end, all of the groups had to present not only the kind of work process that they went through, but also the outcomes that they had achieved and some of the key initiatives that were going to be implemented. And he was in charge of presenting for his group. And it was very complimentary because at the very end, he said, I saw how this process was able to shift my mindset from where I was to where I am today. And I see the benefit of working in this way. And so during his presentation, him saying that was, I think, the biggest achievement for me working with that group, because it was a complete shift in mindset for one individual.
If you're enjoying this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We've got plenty more great stories coming your way. So let's shift the talking back on sort of the people in an organization in a way necessarily from the executives per se. And, there's fear in an organization with digital transformation, certainly about losing jobs, right? But there's also an issue underneath that, which is even something more human, which is confidence. You know, some people and companies don't see themselves as tech people or as digital people, and along comes this wave of change. And I think you've talked sometimes about building digital confidence as something for people to embrace a little bit more of the change. Can you talk a little bit more about this digital confidence and what role that plays?
I have to first preface, Bruce. People tend to think technologists are on top of everything, but I have to say, even I'm neck deep in technology all day long. Even I feel left behind at some points. And even I feel that technology is moving at such a rapid pace. Am I keeping up with enough? Am I keeping up with the right things? And I think, I can only imagine how tough it can be for people within organizations who are non-tech. One of the things I try to tell individuals that I work with, teams that I work with, is let's not get overwhelmed. Let's take a step back and think about your industry, your business, your role, and focus in on that. What are the technologies or what are the tech solutions out there that are disrupting the work that you do today? Let's focus in on that element. And let's try to understand what you need to do or what you need to learn as an individual in order to ensure that you're not becoming outdated or your skills are not becoming outdated, that you're able to pick up these capabilities and knowledge. And with this, digital confidence comes in really understanding how the technology is going to implement yourself first, or how it's going to impact yourself first, and then understanding what you need to do or what kind of learning journey you need to build. When someone says AI is impacting my job, they should be able to understand what that means and how that impact is going to show itself. And not going down the route, and if you want to, you could go down the route of technical skill building. That's, it's also fairly easy to pick up those skills today with the amount of knowledge that's out there. But the basics of digital literacy or AI and technology literacy, that's something that every individual has to prioritize and spend the time on.
Yeah, so I love that. So you don't have to understand what makes an LLM, but you can sort of narrowly say, here's the job that I have in the company, and here's ways that AI and other digital change might make it different in the future, and maybe I should prepare for that change, right? Really narrowing in.
And if we look at, I think it was a Cornell recent survey that was published in March of this year. Only 29% of employees within global workforces are AI literate, that they've done the training and they're AI literate. This is a huge knowledge gap that organizations need to really address, because the way that we work, even in the consulting industry, the work that we do is completely being disrupted. We've got to rethink what we do and how we do, because this is something that's completely changing in the next 1 to 2 years.
Cool. So we're starting down that AI path, and I want to push more there a little bit. So the example you used about how you use AI, that exposes an element of AI that in the past, technology did a lot of automation of manual tasks, of non-thinking, but that's a thoughtful task that AI is taking off your plate a little bit. So we have the change in what AI can automate and can work on, and just the pace of AI. So when you think about digital transformation from here going forward, how has AI shifted the purpose and pace of those transformations?
So this is where I think a lot of times organizations tend to confuse that, okay, now we're looking at the next technology hype, which is AI. So digital transformation becomes irrelevant. Digital transformation is never going to be irrelevant because it's an evolutionary process that a company has to go through. Technologies develop and they progress continuously, but transformation focuses on how the organization can best use that technology and stay competitive for the future. And this is where AI is enabling digital transformation very much in terms of how we implement certain things, how we implement different processes. So if I give you an example, with digital transformation, one of the key things that we do is we look at your process environment, we look at how to automate or optimize your processes, ensuring there's a 30 to 50% reduction or increase in efficiency. So this is one of the things that we might do within an organization. With AI solutions today, that process of identifying which process or workflow needs to be optimized, how it could be digitized, what kind of technologies could be used to digitize, this can be sped up with the tech that we use. So we are using, to enhance the work that I'm doing, I'm using an AI system alongside my team in order to do that in a fraction of the time. And this not only benefits my team because we are able to deliver solutions faster, but it also impacts the organizations we're working for because they get their results faster. And this is, for me, a win-win situation where AI systems support the progression of digital transformation. And we're seeing this in multiple areas. Another example would be within digital transformation, we look at skills assessments, right? Where if we implement a certain technology, where would we need to optimize skill sets and capabilities to upskill, new skill, and reskill teams? And we have an AI system that supports us in identifying, so looking at CVs or looking at profiles of team members and identifying where skill gaps are. Something that we used to do manually, we are able to do this now in an automated way. So fraction of the time, more detailed results. And I think this is a win-win for us as well as the organizations we work for. So there are many instances where using digital transformation in collaboration or cohesion with AI allows us to optimize the process further.
Great. So you've shared a lot of examples of how AI helps you and drive the transformation process for your clients in these big organizations. But as you think about AI being a part of the actual systems and technologies being deployed inside of companies, what are the things you see where you're worried about it pulling us in the wrong direction, right? Like any technology is neutral, right? It's what you do with it. What do you see as being some risks associated with AI as part of a digital transformation going forward?
One of the biggest risks that I'm encountering is really the algorithmic trust, where people have too much trust with the AI systems in that transformation process. So an example I can give you that happened recently was with this AI system, one of the outcomes was it identified a person's profile as, this person would not be needed in the new team structure. And so the leadership team that we were working with was very quick to say, oh yeah, let's take that recommendation on board. So the trust in the systems, the trust in the AI, not just AI, in most technologies is significantly high compared to the trust sometimes even to human teams. And so having this human oversight, having this kind of ethical or oversight team that has this ethical overview of what's being implemented, that is really critical. And I'm not seeing enough organizations set up this sort of oversight teams. So that the AI systems are being increasingly used for decision-making across different functional areas. Big one that we're seeing is recruitment. We're seeing this as well within financial services, credit scoring. And so a lot of this concerns me significantly because I think this is where people need to have a critical eye on the outcomes, particularly when there's a knowledge gap around understanding how the systems work and why these decisions are being put as an output, right? So if you don't understand what goes in and how it's being processed, you should not trust the outcomes of it, and you should have a critical eye of that. And I think this is one of my biggest concerns at the moment.
All right, let's look ahead and thinking about this. How should leaders evolve to guide organizations through an AI-driven future? Because I think we all know there's going to be somewhat of an AI-driven future, without losing what makes them human and what makes their organizations human.
So a couple of things is, I think, definitely ensure that as a leader within an organization, first of all, have a good understanding for what these technologies are and how they could and should be used. And have a very strong view that these technologies enable and augment human teams rather than replace. And I think this is one of the biggest elements that we can ensure is implemented within a company. You have to make sure that the technology is not replacing humans, but it is working in cohesion with them. And the human team has to be the priority in my view, right? So looking at the people within the organizations, the values they represent, how they work as teams, and how these technologies can then enhance what they're doing, optimize, digitize, and kind of work alongside them rather than replace what they are doing. And of course, there might be situations where you have to reduce the team size. You can optimize to a point where you can optimize costs as well. All of this is definitely understood, but it's not a 100% replacement, as I've heard teams discuss so far. Another element is ensuring that you are, as a leader, taking your organization on that transformation journey with you. So start off from the very beginning with engaging with your teams, engaging with your workforce, helping them to understand why the transformation has to happen, why these technologies are being used, what is the kind of vision at the end that you want to achieve, and take them on that journey. And one of the most critical things, which I don't see enough of, is leadership teams making sure that they have an open ear to the workforce for their concerns, and really having the openness to have this discussion. If there are concerns, if there are fears, if there are things that are not going well, to have this ability to open themselves up to even criticism. I think this is some of the things that are critical to have at this point.
I love that. So it's sort of have an intent to being human-centric and being open to listening to what's going on and whether you get there. Fantastic. All right, I'd love to close out. I have a set of questions that I close all my podcasts with. So if you're ready, let's go through them.
Let's go.
All right. What's one leadership skill that you think will become even more important in the future?
Abundance thinking. Abundance thinking in the sense that leadership teams, a leader in today's organization has to understand that things are no longer going to function the way that they're used to. Physical limitations are being broken, regional boundaries are being broken, physical digital boundaries are being broken every day. So think beyond the current and have this abundance mindset that anything is possible with human and technology in place.
Awesome. Now, I like to give my guests a magic wand for a little bit of time. So I'm giving you a magic wand now. And if you could wave it and immediately make things change, what would you do to make organizations more humanity-centric?
Maybe a bit controversial, but I would implement a values contract for all leadership teams, particularly in the tech industry. I did a TED talk about this. Values contract in the sense that the leadership teams are assessed and with sufficient consequence in place to align themselves to the values of the organization, human values. And basically they're measured and they have to deliver against those values, not just financial results, but also values results.
Awesome. I love that. Now, what's one final piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners?
I think the one thing I would say is don't be afraid of technology. Embrace the change that's happening.
Great. And finally, where can our listeners follow your work and go deeper into the ideas that you're championing?
I am on lardipartner.com. That's our company website. And my personal website is kamaleslardi.com. But you'll also find me quite active on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kamales.
Thank you as well, Bruce. It was a pleasure.
I hope you found my conversation with Kamales insightful and inspiring. Her approach to digital transformation reminds us that technology is only as powerful as the people it empowers. If you enjoyed this discussion, I'd love for you to share it with others and subscribe to the podcast for more conversations on leading with humanity at scale. Now let's dive into the after show, a segment where we'll reflect on key takeaways from this episode and share additional thoughts on how leaders can embrace technology without losing sight of their people. Welcome to the after show, where I'm excited to share some thoughts about my discussion with Kamales Lardi. So often, digital transformation gets framed as a tech challenge, a software rollout, a system migration, a new platform with promises of efficiency. But what Kamales made so clear is that transformation doesn't fail because of bad code. It fails when people don't come along for the ride. Her story about the SAP implementation that technically worked but didn't deliver value because people didn't trust or use it, that was a powerful reminder. It was her turning point, and it should be a wake-up call for all of us. Here are 5 takeaways that really stood out for me. First, tech doesn't fail, people disengage. That early project Kamales talked about was a perfect example. The tool worked, but it wasn't used. Why? Because people didn't trust it. They fell back on old habits. The technology became just another step instead of a true enabler. And that only reinforces the core insight. Transformation lives or dies based on how people experience it. Second, transformation is 80% about people and only 20% about tech. That flips the way many leaders still think about this work. Instead of leading with the systems and bolting on change management at the end, Kamales starts with people, from the first conversation about purpose all the way through implementation. It's a different mindset, and it leads to a different kind of outcome, one that actually sticks. The third thought is that transformation requires synchrony, not just alignment. I loved her metaphor of a rowing team. It's not enough to agree on direction. You need to move in rhythm. And that means building teams that stay connected, not just in a kickoff meeting, but all the way through. Small teams, shared ownership, real time progress. That's what creates energy, not just compliance. Fourth, build digital confidence, not just digital skills. This really resonated. So many people don't see themselves as tech people, and that sense of not belonging can create a wall of resistance. Kamales encourages a different path. Focus on how tech affects your specific work. Start there, understand it. Learn enough to stay relevant and feel in control. That kind of confidence opens the door to real engagement. And finally, don't blindly trust the technology. Kamales shared a story where an AI system flagged an employee as unnecessary, and the leadership team almost accepted that without question. That's the danger. It's easy to get wowed by the speed and precision of AI, but we can't lose our judgment. Human oversight isn't a barrier to transformation. It's what keeps it ethical, intentional, and human. In the end, the future of transformation isn't just about what we build, it's about what we enable. And that raises some important questions. As we integrate more advanced technologies, how are we also deepening our capacity to stay connected to the people they impact? And in shaping the systems of tomorrow, how do we ensure they reflect not just our ambitions, but our values? That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for tuning in to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Remember, true leadership isn't only about achieving short-term results. It's about creating a lasting positive impact on all of the people you touch. Join me next time as we uncover more insights and strategies for humanity-centric leadership. Until then, I'm Bruce Temkin, encouraging you to lead with purpose and empathy and to be the spark that elevates humanity at scale.